An alien mother was desperate and alone. Then a human farmer opened his heart. The outcasts in the storm, the frozen winds of Kepler 442b cut through Zara's thin robes like razor blades, making her pull her young son Nexus closer to her chest. Her violet skin glowed dimly with the bioluminescent patterns that marked her as one of the Vithara, though now those same markings felt like a curse. The elegant spirals that once proclaimed her noble bloodline now pulsed weakly, struggling to provide warmth against the bitter cold. "Mother, I can't feel my feet," Nexus whispered, his small voice barely audible over the howling wind. At only 8 cycles old, he was too young to understand why they had been cast out from their crystal cities, why the Council of Elders had stripped them of everything. "Stay strong, little star," Zara murmured, adjusting what remained of her ceremonial cloak. The shimmering fabric had been designed for the climate-controlled towers of their homeworld, not the harsh wilderness of this human colony planet. "We'll find shelter soon." The words tasted like lies. They had been walking, for 3 days since their exile, surviving on nothing but melted snow and the few edible roots Zara remembered from her youth. The memory of High Counselor Vex's cold pronouncement still echoed in her mind. "For refusing to surrender your hybrid offspring to the purification chambers, you are both banished. May the void claim your tainted bloodline." Nexus was her greatest joy and her greatest shame. Born from a forbidden union with a human researcher during the early days of interspecies cooperation, he carried genes from both their worlds. The Vithara considered such mixing an abomination, a dilution of their pure evolutionary path. They would have taken him, studied him, then eliminated him to preserve their genetic supremacy. She had chosen exile over watching her son die. As darkness fell, bringing temperatures that could freeze Vithara blood solid, Zara spotted something impossible on the horizon. Light. Warm, golden light spilling from the windows of what appeared to be a human settlement. Her heart leaped with desperate hope. The structure was unlike anything in the Vithara cities. Where her people built with living crystal and shaped energy, this dwelling was made of simple materials, wood, metal, and stone. Yet it radiated a warmth that had nothing to do with temperature. Smoke curled from a chimney and she could see movement inside through frosted windows. "Please," she called out in broken standard as they approached, her voice cracking from exhaustion. "My son, he needs help." The door opened, revealing a human male in his 50s with weathered hands and kind eyes. Marcus Webb had been farming this harsh world for 20 years, carving out a life from unforgiving soil. His brown hair was streaked with premature gray, and his face bore the lines of someone who had known both loss and perseverance. "Holy stars," Marcus breathed, taking in their desperate condition. "Get inside, both of you, quickly." He didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions about their species or their circumstances. He simply saw 2 beings in distress and acted with the instinctive compassion that defined the best of humanity. The warmth of his home enveloped them like an embrace, and Zara nearly collapsed with relief. "I'm Marcus," he said, already moving to stoke the fire higher. "What are your names?" I am Zara. This is my son, Nexus." The formal titles of her former rank died on her lips. She was no longer a noble of the crystal courts. She was just a mother protecting her child. Marcus nodded, accepting this without judgment. "Well, Zara and Nexus, you're safe now. Let's get you both warm and fed." He wrapped them in thick blankets that smelled of earth and growing things, then disappeared into his kitchen to prepare food. As Nexus fell asleep against her side, his small body finally relaxing in the sanctuary Marcus had provided, Zara felt something she hadn't experienced in days. Hope. This human stranger had shown them more kindness in minutes than her own people had in a lifetime. She didn't know that this moment would change all their lives forever. Unlikely bonds form morning light streamed through the windows of Marcus's farmhouse, warming the simple wooden floors where Zara and Nexus had spent their first peaceful night in days. The human had given them his own bed while he slept on the couch, a gesture of selflessness that still amazed her. Marcus was already in the kitchen when she woke, preparing what smelled like breakfast. His movements were efficient but unhurried, speaking of someone comfortable with solitude and routine, yet he had disrupted that routine without complaint to help strangers. "Good morning," he said without turning around. "How did you sleep?" "Better than we have in weeks," Zara admitted, studying this unusual human. "Why did you help us, your people and mine? We haven't always been allies." Marcus paused in his food preparation, his shoulders tensing slightly. "My wife used to say that kindness doesn't require treaties or trade agreements. It just requires being human." He turned to face her, and she saw old pain in his eyes. She was taken by raiders 5 years ago. Vithara raiders, actually. The revelation hit Zara like a physical blow. She should have expected hatred, revenge, some desire for retribution. Instead, this man had shown them mercy. I'm sorry. If you want us to leave..." "I don't," Marcus interrupted firmly. "Whatever happened to Rachel wasn't your fault. And even if it was, that boy of yours doesn't deserve to pay for the sins of others." Nexus chose that moment to emerge from the bedroom, rubbing sleep from his eyes. His hybrid features were more pronounced in daylight, the violet undertones of his skin mixing with human pink, his large eyes holding both species' intelligence. He was beautiful and strange, a living bridge between two worlds. "Are we still safe?" Nexus asked quietly, moving to his mother's side. "Safer than you've ever been," Marcus replied, crouching down to the boy's level. "You hungry, son? I make a mean breakfast." The casual endearment made Zara's breath catch. When had anyone called her child son with such genuine warmth? In Vithara society, Nexus was an anomaly to be hidden or eliminated. Here he was simply a boy who needed breakfast. Over the following days, an unexpected rhythm developed. Marcus showed them around his farm, explaining his crops and animals with patient enthusiasm. The work was physical and honest, so different from the ethereal pursuits of Vithara nobles. Zara found herself drawn to the soil and growing things, her hands learning to coax life from the earth. Nexus thrived in ways that broke and healed her heart simultaneously. Away from the whispered condemnations of the crystal cities, he could simply be a child. He helped Marcus with chores, asked endless questions about human agriculture, and laughed in ways Zara had never heard before. His hybrid nature, once a source of shame, became an advantage. He was stronger than human children, but more adaptable than pure Vithara. "He's special," Marcus observed one evening as they watched Nexus play with the farm's cat, a massive orange creature that had immediately adopted the boy. Not because of his genetics, because of his heart. The council couldn't see past his mixed blood, Zara said softly. They called him an abomination. Marcus's jaw tightened with anger. Then they're fools. Some of the strongest things in nature come from mixing different elements. Hybrid crops are often more resilient than purebreds. Same with people, I'd bet. His words carried a weight that made her look at him more closely. There was something in his tone, a personal understanding that went beyond simple philosophy. "Marcus," she began carefully, "what happened to your wife?" "Really?" The human was quiet for a long moment, watching Nexus play. "She was Vithara," he finally admitted. "Not full-blooded like you, but enough that her own people rejected her. The raiders who took her, they were from the same faction that exiled you. The purists." Understanding crashed over Zara like cold water. Marcus hadn't just lost his wife to violence, he had lost her to the same hatred that had driven Zara from her home. They were both victims of racial supremacy, both refugees, from the cruelty of pureblood ideology. "So you see," Marcus continued, "helping you isn't charity. It's justice. It's what Rachel would have wanted." That night, as they sat together watching the twin moons rise over the alien landscape, Zara felt something she had never expected to experience again, the warmth of belonging. This human farmer, this man who had every reason to hate her people, had given her and her son something precious beyond measure. He had given them home. Danger from the past 3 months had passed since Marcus had taken them in, and life on the farm had settled into something Zara had never dared hope for: normalcy. Nexus had grown stronger and more confident, his laughter now a common sound. Around the homestead, she herself had learned to find joy in simple things: the satisfaction of a successful harvest, the warmth of Marcus's rare smiles, the peace of evenings spent together as an unlikely family. It was during one of these peaceful mornings that their past caught up with them. Zara was tending to the greenhouse when she felt it, a familiar psychic resonance that made her blood run cold. Vithara ships had entered the system. Her patterns began to glow with involuntary stress response, pulsing in ancient warning rhythms. "Marcus," she called, running toward the house where he was teaching Nexus to repair farming equipment. "They've found us." The human looked up sharply, his expression immediately shifting to alert concern. Years of living on the frontier had taught him to read danger signals. "Who's found us?" "My people. I can sense their ships." Her voice shook, despite her efforts to remain calm. "They've come for Nexus." Marcus set down his tools and moved with sudden purpose toward a storage cabinet Zara had never seen him open. Inside were weapons, military grade, not the simple hunting rifles of a farmer. "How long do we have?" "Maybe hours, maybe minutes." "Marcus, you don't understand. These won't be ordinary Vithara. They'll send hunters, elite warriors trained specifically to retrieve exiles and eliminate contamination." Nexus looked between them with growing fear. "Mother, what's happening? Are the bad people coming back?" Before Zara could answer, the sky lit up with the distinctive blue-white streaks of Vithara, atmospheric entry. 3 sleek vessels descended like falling stars, their crystalline hulls reflecting the sunlight in ominous rainbows. "Inside," Marcus ordered, his voice carrying military authority that surprised them both. "Now." They huddled in the farmhouse, as the ships landed in the nearby fields, their presence scorching the carefully tended crops. Through the windows, Zara watched as figures emerged, tall, elegant Vithara in hunting armor, their patterns glowing with ceremonial authority. At their head walked someone who made Zara's heart stop: Hunter Prime Kith, her former betrothed. His silver patterns proclaimed his rank, and his cold beauty was unmarred by the compassion that had begun to soften Zara's features during her time with Marcus. "Zara of the 7th Spiral," Kith's voice carried easily across the distance, amplified by Vithara biotechnology. "You have been found in violation of your exile terms. Surrender the abomination, and your death will be swift." Marcus checked his weapons with practiced efficiency. "I count 12 of them. Military formation energy weapons." He looked at Zara with grim determination. "I won't let them take him." "You can't fight them all," Zara protested. "These are trained killers. You're just a farmer," Marcus finished with a bitter smile. "Right, except farmers on frontier worlds don't last long without certain skills." He activated a hidden panel, revealing communication equipment. "I'm calling in some old favors." The response was immediate. "Marcus, this is Captain Rodriguez, of the Terran Defense Corvette Defiance. We received your emergency beacon. What's your situation?" "Hostile alien forces threatening civilian refugees on my property. Request immediate assistance." "Copy that, Marcus. We're 15 minutes out. Try to stay alive until then." Zara stared at him in amazement. "Who are you?" "Someone who learned a long time ago that sometimes good people need protecting from bad ones," Marcus replied. "Now can you do that light pattern thing of yours? Because I need to send these hunters a message they'll understand." Outside, Kith was growing impatient. "Zara, face me with honor, or I will burn this primitive dwelling with everyone inside." Marcus stepped out onto his porch, weapon in hand, but lowered. To the hunters he must have looked absurdly small, one aging human against their enhanced warrior band. "This is private property," he called out calmly. "You're trespassing." Kith's laugh was like breaking crystal. "Human, you speak to the Hunter Prime of the Vithara Purification Corps. Stand aside or be cleansed along with the contamination you harbor." "Counteroffer," Marcus replied, and his voice carried an edge that spoke of battles fought and won. You leave now or you explain to your council why their precious Hunter Prime got himself killed by a farmer. The threat hung in the air like gathering thunder. And in the distance, the first whisper of approaching human ships began to make itself heard. The real battle was about to begin. Part 4. When two worlds collide, the standoff stretched taut as a wire, with Marcus facing down 12 elite Vithara, hunters armed with only his conviction, and a rapidly approaching human patrol. Kith's silver patterns pulsed with arrogant amusement at the sight of one middle-aged farmer, daring to defy the might of the Purification Corps. Your death will be remembered as particularly foolish, Kith declared, raising his crystalline weapon. The other hunters spread into attack formation, their movements fluid and predatory. That's when Zara stepped out beside Marcus, her own patterns blazing with defiant violet fire. Nexus followed, small but determined, his hybrid patterns creating colors neither pure Vithara nor human had ever seen before. Stand down, Kith, Zara commanded, her voice carrying the authority of her former noble rank. I invoke the right of sacred challenge. The Hunter Prime's expression shifted from amusement to surprise, then to calculating interest. You would invoke ancient law to protect this contamination? The right has not been called upon for 3 generations. Because no one had reason to call it, Zara replied steadily. But I do now. I challenge the legitimacy of the purification doctrine. I claim protection for my son under the old ways. Marcus kept his weapon ready while watching this exchange with growing understanding. Zara was buying them time, using cultural laws that even fanatic hunters couldn't ignore. But he could hear the approaching hum of the human ships growing louder. Very well, Kith said, after a moment's consideration. I accept your challenge, cousin. When I defeat you in ritual combat, the contamination dies and you return to face the Council's judgment. Wait, Marcus interrupted, stepping forward. What exactly does this challenge involve? Kith's patterns flickered with disdain. Single combat between noble bloodlines. The human has no standing in Vithara law. Actually, Nexus spoke up in his young voice. He does. All eyes turned to the boy who stood straighter despite his fear. In the old ways, anyone who provides sanctuary becomes family. Marcus is bound to us now. He can speak for our bloodline. Zara's patterns flared with sudden understanding and fierce pride. Her son had been listening to more than just farming lessons. He had absorbed the old stories, the traditional laws that even the Purification Corps claimed to uphold. The child speaks truth, one of the other hunters admitted reluctantly. Ancient law recognizes sanctuary bonds. Kith's beautiful features twisted with frustrated rage. I will not be bound by primitive customs. The purity of our race demands. His words were cut off by the roar of human engines as 3 patrol ships dropped out of the sky. Weapons hot and targeting systems locked onto the Vithara vessels. Captain Rodriguez's voice boomed from external speakers. Attention alien forces. You are in violation of Colonial Defense Treaty Article 7. Stand down immediately or face defensive action. The air crackled with tension as 2 different cultures and their technologies faced off. Vithara energy weapons hummed against human plasma cannons. Ancient ritual law clashed with modern military doctrine. Humans, Kith spat, always interfering with matters beyond their comprehension. Maybe, Marcus said quietly, but we understand protecting family, and that's what you're threatening. What happened next surprised everyone. Nexus walked forward, placing himself between the 2 armed groups. His hybrid patterns began to pulse in a rhythm none of them had seen before. Something that seemed to incorporate both Vithara ceremonial sequences and human mathematical progressions. Stop, the boy said, and though his voice was small, it carried across the sudden silence. This isn't about purity or contamination, it's about fear. He looked directly at Kith, his young eyes holding wisdom beyond his years. You're afraid that people like me prove your beliefs are wrong. That mixing doesn't make us weaker. It makes us stronger. You know nothing, abomination, Kith snarled, but his weapon wavered. I know that my mother is the bravest person alive, Nexus continued. I know that Marcus showed us kindness when your people showed us cruelty. I know that the humans came to help us because that's what good people do. His patterns shifted to colors that seemed to encompass both species' emotional spectrums. And I know that calling someone an abomination says more about you than it does about them. For a moment, even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Then Captain Rodriguez's voice cut through the tension. Hunter Prime Kith, we have your ship signatures logged. If any harm comes to the civilians under our protection, it will be considered an act of war against the Terran colonial authority. The Hunter Prime looked around at the human ships, at Marcus standing protective and unafraid, at Zara blazing with maternal fury, and at Nexus, the living proof that his ideology was built on lies. This is not over, he said finally. The Council will hear of this contamination. Let them, Zara replied firmly. And when they do, they'll learn that some things are worth more than purity. They'll learn that love creates strength, not weakness. As the Vithara ships lifted off in defeat, Marcus put his arm around both Zara and Nexus. Above them, human patrol ships maintained protective overwatch. The battle was won, but the war for understanding had only just begun. A new hope. Rising 6 months after the confrontation with the Hunters, life had taken on rhythms that none of them could have imagined. Marcus's farm had become something unprecedented, a neutral ground where humans and Vithara could meet as equals, not as suspicious allies bound by fragile treaties. The change had started small. Captain Rodriguez had recommended Marcus's farm as a safe meeting point for interspecies trade negotiations. Word spread through unofficial channels that there was a place where hybrid children were welcomed, where mixed families could find sanctuary from both human prejudice and Vithara purification doctrine. Zara had discovered talents she never knew she possessed. Her noble education, combined with her newfound understanding of human determination, made her uniquely qualified to serve as a cultural translator. She helped resolve disputes, facilitate communication, and most importantly, demonstrate that cooperation between species was not only possible but powerful. Nexus had grown in confidence and wisdom, becoming a bridge between worlds in ways his genetics had only hinted at. Human children visited the farm to learn about Vithara culture, while young Vithara came to understand human resilience and innovation. He taught them all that difference was not something to fear but something to celebrate. Marcus watched these developments with quiet satisfaction. His simple desire to protect a mother and child had grown into something that might reshape the relationship between two civilizations. He had gained a family and discovered a purpose he never knew he was searching for. The real test came when an official delegation arrived from the Vithara High Council. Not hunters this time, but diplomats and scholars, drawn by reports of successful human-Vithara cooperation. Counselor Vera, an elderly Vithara with patterns that spoke of ancient wisdom, examined Nexus with careful attention. So you are the hybrid who has caused such discussion among our people. I'm just Nexus, the boy replied simply. I help with the farm, and I try to make friends with everyone who visits. And you consider yourself Vithara? Human? Something else? Nexus thought about this seriously, his young face reflecting the complexity of the question. I think I'm what happens when two people stop being afraid of each other. I'm what's possible. Counselor Vera's patterns shifted through colors that indicated deep contemplation. She had come expecting to find evidence supporting the purification doctrine. Instead, she found a thriving community that challenged every assumption her people held about genetic mixing. Your mother was right to protect you, she said finally. The council has been hasty in its judgments. Perhaps it is time for new perspectives. The diplomatic breakthrough that followed was historic. The Farm Accords, as they came to be known, established protocols for interspecies cooperation based on the model Marcus, Zara, and Nexus had created. Hybrid children would no longer face persecution. Mixed families would receive protection under both human and Vithara law. But beyond the political victories, something more profound had taken root. Love had proved stronger than prejudice. Acceptance had overcome fear, and the simple act of one human farmer opening his heart to strangers had planted seeds that would grow into forests of possibility. On quiet evenings, when the diplomatic visitors had gone and the farm settled into peaceful routine, the three of them would sit together watching the twin moons rise. They had become a family not through blood or law, but through choice and dedication to something larger than themselves. "Do you ever regret it?" Zara asked one such evening, her hand resting in Marcus's calloused palm. "Taking us in, changing your whole life?" Marcus looked at Nexus, now helping younger children, both human and Vithara, with their studies under the starlight. He thought of Rachel, his first wife, and felt her approval like a warm breeze. She would have loved this boy, loved this woman, loved what their farm had become. "The only thing I regret," he said quietly, "is that it took so long for our paths to cross." Above them, the stars shone with the same light that had guided desperate refugees to an unlikely sanctuary. And in that light, the future looked brighter than any of them had dared hope. Their story had become legend, proof that sometimes the greatest strength comes not from weapons or technology, but from the simple human capacity to see beyond difference to the heart beneath. In a galaxy full of division and suspicion, they had created something revolutionary. A place where love was stronger than fear, where family was defined by choice rather than genetics, and where the future belonged to those brave enough to build bridges instead of walls. The farm had become more than a sanctuary. It had become hope itself, growing wild and strong in the alien soil of a new world.